You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. A warm welcome from a cold and wet Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Eben, Jansen. The show is broadcast live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are then repeated at 2 in the afternoon with a complete rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every weekday with the entire show available on our YouTube channel all of the time. Now, a woman's chilling screams before 4 loud gunshots rang out was a damning witness account of Oscar Pistorius' contention that he mistook his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp for an intruder on Valentine's Day last year. Michelle Burger, the first witness, took to the dock yesterday and held her own as she gave evidence in South Africa's trial of the century. She will continue her testimony today and we'll cross live to the court before that gets underway in a couple of minutes. We'll also look at the price increase of fuel tonight and then Israel's perceived apartheid policies. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. The state's first witness in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial will return to the stand today to complete a testimony of the events during the night of Valentine's Day last year, when Pistorius allegedly killed his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp. Pistorius advocate Barry Roo will continue with his cross-examination of Michelle Burger in the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Burger's house is less than 200 meters from the house of Pistorius. She testified that she heard a woman scream for help before she heard gunshots. Justice Minister Jeff Radebe has praised the South African prosecution team for its efforts toward having honeymoon murder suspect Shrindavani extradited to South Africa. This after the High Court in Britain dismissed Devani's appeal against extradition. Devani, who is from Bristol in Western England, will face charges related to the murder of his wife Annie in Cape Town in November 2010. They were on honeymoon at the time. And in a shocking development, Protea captain Graham Smith has announced he will retire from all international cricket after the third test against Australia, which is currently underway in Cape Town. Smith has the most victories for a captain in test history. He's led his side to 53 wins with a win percentage of 49%. He scored 9,262 runs in 117 tests at an average of 48.49. The 33-year-old opener said it was the most difficult decision he'd ever have to make. Day 2 of the Oscar Pistorius trial starts in less than an hour in the Pretoria High Court. Dubbed as the trial of the century, it has attracted unprecedented local and international media attention. Millions around the world heard a witness account yesterday of a woman's chilling screams before 4 shots rang out on that fateful night. Pistorius' counsel contended then that it was a well-known fact amongst those who knew Pistorius that he himself screamed like a woman. The contention drew laughs from a packed North Gauteng High Court. For the latest, we cross now to our reporter outside to give us the latest. Griselda Lewis, good morning to you, my dear. You're right.
Good morning, Eben. Just very wet here, but I'm okay.
Well, you're doing a super job there, standing on the pavement, keeping dry. But let's just recap on what's happening around you quickly. Just tell us, proceedings start a little bit earlier this morning, and the media frenzy continues. We see.
Well, that's right. 9:30, we were expecting proceedings to get underway. Michelle Burger, the state's first witness, will be cross-examined again today, the second day of cross-examination. And rightly, as you put it, Eben, we're expecting more drama from inside the court. This is the first a contradiction, basically, that we hear from Michelle Burger, or the first testimony that we're hearing that contradicts that of Oscar Pistorius. Oscar Pistorius has always maintained that he shot and killed Reeva Steenkamp, thinking that there was an intruder in the bathroom of his Pretoria home. Yesterday, we're hearing Michelle Burger basically saying she heard chilling screams, and she also heard cries for help and heard loud bangs, of which she can confirm were 4 gunshots. Also, very interestingly, Eben, after her testimony, we're also expecting her husband to testify, who she mentioned quite extensively during her testimony yesterday. When she was chatting to her husband, she says, after 3 o'clock on that Valentine's Day, when they heard those noises, she and her husband were quite concerned about what was happening, the screams, the shouts, the loud bangs, as well as the shots that were fired there.
What was the consensus, Griselda, amongst those of you on the pavement, and there are a lot of journalists out there? Do they believe that day one was a bad day for Team Pistorius?
Well, it certainly looks that way, but it's very early to say. I mean, this is just about the first witness that has been called, Eben. What remains to be seen, I don't want to prejudge the trial and not take into account that there's other witnesses that still need to testify. It's still too early, but it definitely does raise a few eyebrows, because Oscar has always maintained. Let me just have a look quickly towards my right. I'm being alerted to the fact that there might be some family members who are arriving, but that's actually nothing. Apologies, Eben. We constantly have to be on the lookout here to see when Oscar Pistorius will be arriving. His brother Carl has already arrived. But let me get back to your question again, Eben. International media really basically saying at this stage, that they want to see how this trial unfolds. It is still very early to prejudge whether this will damper the defense's case at all, because this is the first testimony that we're hearing that contradicts what Oscar has been saying all along. All we heard before was the testimony of Oscar Pistorius, because obviously Reeva Steenkamp cannot give her side of the story.
The witness is now the focal point after yesterday.
There we go. We seem to be having, but let me just interrupt you there. It seems like we have some of the Pistorius family arriving there. We're just going to zoom in very quickly. And then there you have it, Oscar Pistorius arriving with some family members. You'll see underneath the blue umbrella there, Oscar Pistorius arriving at court for the second day of his murder trial. Look at the media scrum that you see there. Everybody is trying to get a shot of Oscar Pistorius. You can hear the screams that are taking place. There are lots of pushing and shoving that we saw yesterday as well. Outside the court, we can confirm that Oscar Pistorius has now arrived for the second day of his murder trial. I can tell you, Eben, it's absolutely unbelievable what you are seeing outside this court. The media scrum that is taking place here, pushing Oscar Pistorius and family members who are coming here to sit and listen to the proceedings. Well, I guess the trial is scheduled to get underway any minute now, as you can see there. But you'll remember yesterday as well, quite a media scrum this morning, because yesterday Oscar Pistorius seemed to outfox the media, actually, because while the media was looking the other way, they did not get a shot of him as he was coming inside the court. So really pushing to get that first shot there today. Let me just have a look back. Okay, he's officially gone inside the court. So a lot of drama we're expecting here on day two.
Before we go back to the witness, now that you see the family members almost walking him in or scrumming him into the court there, I wanted to ask you about the family members. They're sitting on the same bench, the family of the victim and those of the accused. Is there a sense of animosity between them? Was there uncomfortableness between them in court yesterday at all?
Well, the sense that I was getting here, and from the many times that I had tried to catch a glimpse, was that they really didn't want any eye contact with each other. But you would remember, for example, that June Steenkamp, Reeva's mother, came to court for the very first time. She basically saw Oscar Pistorius, the man responsible for shooting and killing her daughter, for the very first time yesterday. Without speaking to her, it's very difficult to gauge what her feelings are, but definitely, wearing black yesterday, probably interpreting that as a mother who's in grief, which we presume she will be for a very long time. We've seen interviews that have been conducted previously where the family really has been going through a very tough time trying to come to terms with what happened on that fateful Valentine's Day.
Before we move on quickly, Griselda, I just wanted to go back to the witness. What was the verdict on Michelle Burger's performance in court yesterday?
Well, when you say a verdict, Eben, I presume that you're trying to gauge the sense of what people were thinking. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Basically, there's not much that's been said about it, but it was just basically the testimony give us an idea of what possibly could have happened on that day. You know, the details now are really starting to emerge as the different witnesses, of course, will take the stand and give their version of events in terms of what they know, not what they witnessed, but what they possibly heard. Some of the neighbors that will be called. So not much of a sense at the moment. Still quite early to prejudge what might happen next. But we'll definitely monitor that as the different witnesses are called. And, of course, the trial continues.
Griselda, thank you very much. I understand you have to go back into court there as proceedings are about to get underway. All the best and thanks for a lovely contribution this morning. That's Griselda Lewis right on the spot, giving us up-to-date, even walking Oscar Pistorius into the court there this morning. We bring it to you live right here on Newsroom. Of course, just to recap the very first day, first witness, Michelle Burger, who lives close to the Blade Runner's home in a security complex east of Pretoria, gave evidence of a woman's chilling screams before 4 gunshots rang out. Oscar Pistorius stands accused of premeditated murder after he shot and killed his model girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, in the early hours of Valentine's Day last year.
The sensational trial got underway 90 minutes late. Officials tried to locate an Afrikaans interpreter at the last minute. And already on day one, the guns are out. As the first details of what could have happened on Valentine's Day last year started emerging. Pistorius cut a composed figure in court as the world watches. The prosecution maintains he shot and killed Steenkamp in cold blood and says it will prove just that.
The state's case is based on circumstantial evidence that includes evidence of what the neighbours in the accused estate as well as neighbouring estates heard. We will lead ballistic and forensic evidence. We will also argue that there's certain inference to be drawn from the scene. Lady, we argue that the accused version during the bail application and today cannot be reasonably possibly true, should be rejected, and as the only inference from the circumstantial evidence would be that the accused shot and killed the deceased with direct intent to kill.
He mistook Steenkamp for an intruder. He's pleaded not guilty to all the charges.
Understand the charges, Mr. Pistorius?
I do, my lady.
How do you plead?
Not guilty, my lady.
But the first state witness tells a different story. Michelle Burger, a resident in the neighboring estate, stays just 177 meters from Pistorius' home. Burger testified that she was awoken by a woman's petrified screams around 3 a.m. on February the 14th, desperately calling for help. She says her husband rushed to the balcony, called security, thinking the home was under attack. Burger said she heard a man screaming and calling for help. This was followed by more blood-curdling screams from a woman, and then 4 shots were fired. The scream stopped after the last shot, but the defense tore into the witness, saying she contradicted herself. Advocate Berry Roos said the noises she heard could have been the bat Pistorius had used to break down the bathroom door. But Burger stood firm in her testimony.
What a gunshot sounds like.
That's what you interpret to be a gunshot. You know, it's at night. It sounds strange at night, especially 3 o'clock in the morning or thereabout. You hear sounds, and in your mind, and I'm not saying you're lying, in your mind, you hear gunshots. And that's why I'm testing. Why would you be an expert to say those were definitely gunshots and not another sound resembling a gunshot? That would be a hard boom, 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 not that.
Milady, I've heard gunshots before.
How many
100%. Various times in my life.
The defense also implied that it could have been an anxious Pistorius screaming, sounding like a woman. Listening attentively to proceeding, Reeva Steenkamp's mother, June, who met her daughter's killer for the first time face to face. Of Reeva Steenkamp's mother as she walked into court. She seated on the same bench as the Pistorius family, just meters away. But throughout proceedings, she avoided any form of contact. The tension between the two families palpable.
Dramatic testimony about a woman's terrified screams marked the first day of the murder trial of the Paralympian Oscar Pistorius. Michelle Berger, an economics lecturer at the University of Pretoria, made for a gripping start to Pistorius' high-profile trial a year after the shooting. She was the first witness called by prosecutor Gerrie Nel and appeared to contradict Pistorius' denial of the state's claim that the couple had a row just before Steenkamp died. Now, in studio, we are joined by the director from Worksman's Attorneys, Bernard Hotz, to speak to us more about what he saw in court yesterday. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Eben.
I wanted to start at the beginning because it was the first day. I wanted to talk about the plea and the not guilty plea on all counts. What are the implications of that in the run-out of this trial?
Eben, really that's the first stage in the proceedings where the charges have to be formally put to the accused. The accused is given an opportunity of pleading guilty or not guilty. Obviously, the plea was one of not guilty, and the case would then commence with the state adducing its first witness, which is precisely what has happened.
Now, you're the expert. As you read this trial, what are the key questions that need to be answered for Oscar Pistorius in this trial?
Eben, bearing in mind that the state bears the onus of proving beyond reasonable doubt, and I think it's important to differentiate between criminal trials and civil trials. In a criminal trial, the state bears the onus of proving beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of an accused. Yeah. Here we're also dealing with Oscar Pistorius being charged with what people call premeditated murder. In other words, one has to show that he had the intention of murdering Reeva Steenkamp. The state bears that onus. Yeah. The difficulty here is that the only witness to what happened is Oscar Pistorius himself. Yeah. And hence we're dealing with a trial which is going to be based upon circumstantial evidence and forensic evidence. And at the end of all of that, the judge is going to have to reach a conclusion.
What do you make of yesterday's proceedings with the screams being heard before the gunshots? It's a real indictment by a witness account. And then the counsel for Pistorius' contention that Oscar screams like a woman and that could have been the mistake that the witness made.
Eben, it's very important for the state to lay the foundation for their case. And bearing in mind what I said previously about a circumstantial case, we now hear from a first witness that there were screams that were heard. Whether it was one voice or two voices, we're dealing with the fact that screams were heard. And I think the state will obviously lead the further witnesses to bolster that version, to differentiate between what Oscar Pistorius said in his bail hearing as opposed to what we now hear from the first witness.
I wanted to ask you about a key question that's come out, and that's the fact that Oscar didn't call the police after the shooting himself. How would that sort of scenario play out in front of a magistrate?
Well, Eben, I think we've also got to remember we're living in South Africa, and most of us these days, the first person that we call when we're in trouble is our security company. So I don't think one can read too much into the fact that he didn't phone the police. Yeah. It's what did he do?
The question about Oscar himself, do you think Oscar will take to the stand?
I've read and I've heard that he intends to take to the stand. It's very important for an accused who believes in his innocence to want to put his version before the court. Adverse inferences could be drawn, for instance, if an accused does not testify. Yeah. The difficulty is that, as we've seen with the first witness, is to subject yourself to cross-examination is a harrowing experience. And Oscar is going to, if he does take the stand, he is going to have to subject himself to the harrowing cross-examination by Gerrie Nel.
In your experience, and you've been before are there any other landmark cases that relied on the same type of evidence, and what were the outcomes in those?
Well, I think one must look at Gerrie Nel's prosecution of the ex-commissioner of police. And if one looks at the facts of that case, one will see quite a few similarities in the circumstantial nature of the evidence, and Gerrie Nel acquitted himself most exceptionally in that matter.
He seems to be an expert, so by default we'll read into it, Bernard, that you say it's going to be a difficult one for Oscar to prove his innocence. But thank you for joining us this morning.
Only a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Bernard Hartz from Worksman's Attorneys, giving us an insight into the legal aspects and, the outcomes of day one. Social media has been buzzing with the Oscar trial, or the trial of the century as it's now been known. Here are some of your views. Llewellyn says, would love to see how Barry Roo plans to prove Oscar's high-pitched voice when screaming. I think everybody would be very interested in that, Llewellyn. Sonny says, Advocate Roo is just trying to make Oscar feel he's getting value for his money. He's clearly run out of sensible questions. Arena says, following the Oscar Pistorius trial, praying for both Oscar, his lawyers, and Reeva's family. This must be so difficult for all of them. That's a tough one, isn't it? Well, keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. We love your contributions there on the red line. That's where you can send us your comments after a short break. Well, we are going to look at the petrol price and also, perceived apartheid in Israel. What do you think of that? This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Sometimes a lot of people, in fact, do not have access, firstly, to palliative care. Secondly, even if they do,
So what? Do we just kill them if they don't have access to palliative care?
I think she's actually crucifying my question, with all due respect.
If you actually actively assist somebody to die, then you are convicted of murder.
Who should take the burden of terminating a life?
It's very problematic for doctors to play God.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. The African National Congress has officially endorsed the upcoming Israeli Apartheid Week campaign, joining now more than 75 South African organizations who've backed the upcoming Palestinian human rights campaign due to take place in South Africa between the 10th and the 16th of March. The week is an annual international series of events that raise awareness of Israel's apartheid policies against Palestinians. In studio today, we are joined by the IAW South Africa spokesperson, Kwara Kekana, and the IAW South Africa National Convener, Mohammed Desai. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start with the event before we get into the details. Just, Kwara, just tell us a little bit about the event later this month and how it's grown.
Well, Israeli Apartheid Week, this is the 10th one that we're having this year. It's basically a series of events. It's rallies, it's movie screenings, it's a lot of events across South African communities and with different student organizations and political formations and trade unions. A lot of organizations that are participating in Israeli Apartheid Week. It's basically a week-long event that raises awareness about the conflict in Israel and Palestine and, to conscientize ordinary citizens on the ground, but also mostly it's about raising a mass-based movement where the international solidarity struggle is concerned.
Mohammed, what are your goals and what is the aim of this event?
Well, Israel is increasingly being considered an apartheid state for two reasons. One is senior South Africans, anti-apartheid struggle icons, have gone through to Palestine and have come back saying that Israel fits fits the definition of being an apartheid state. But also there's a growing paper trail. You have the Human Sciences Research Council producing a 300-page report detailing how Israel violates the crime of apartheid. You have several UN representatives and UN bodies that have declared that Israel is an apartheid state. So the real question is, how do you hold Israel accountable to international law, just as how apartheid South Africa was held accountable to international law by an international solidarity movement? How do you isolate Israel? How do you exert enough pressure on Israel to create the necessary conditions for a just peace to be negotiated between the Israeli regime and the indigenous Palestinian people?
Cora, I want to come back to you. The ANC has now officially endorsed the event or the campaign. What does that mean to you guys?
I mean, as far as BDS South Africa is concerned, we were very happy with the endorsement. I mean, in the early 1960s, the African National Congress, under the leadership of the then President Chief Albert Lutuli, called on the international community to isolate apartheid South Africa at the time. So IAW basically and the BDS, the global BDS movement, is sort of modeled against the international anti-apartheid struggle that the ANC led at the time. So I think for us, it's a great deal, to have the oldest liberation movement on the African continent joining in the movements. But also it speaks to the constituency in itself. ANC has a large constituency, and then it then speaks to the international solidarity struggle, as I said before. Then it then means that, a lot of people can participate in Israel Apartheid Week. It means a great deal to BDS, the global BDS movement, in that regard.
Mohammed, the reports are that this is going to be the largest IAW event since 2004. What's your views on that, and what's the thinking?
It's going to be the most exciting and sexiest place to be in. Next week, Israeli Apartheid Week takes place in over 150 cities across the country, across the world. It takes place in more than 25 South African towns and cities, as well as at 15 South African universities. So, in one way, we've stretched geographically, but also the kind of events that will be held during Israeli Apartheid Week this year have also extended. So, for example, Simpiwe Dana will be holding a solidarity music concert at Wits University. The Orange Farm Township will be holding a fund run in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So it's not just your boring lectures or rallies or protests, it's also finding creative ways to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people, just as how during the 1980s people found creative ways to stand in solidarity with us South Africans, how people in the international community in London, in Toronto, in New York and other places held free Nelson Mandela concerts, they held fund runs, they held various sorts of events to highlight the apartheid policies of the South African regime. And we're following really in the footsteps of these people that really committed and made our struggle their lives. Israeli Apartheid Week offers ordinary people an opportunity to participate in an extraordinary campaign.
Now, this is a very heavy subject matter, and you must there must be some response from the Jewish community, not just in South Africa but globally. What are the sort of obstacles that you've come up against?
I mean, typically, like when you had the international anti-apartheid movement that was led by the ANC at the time, you had people like Ronald Reagan at the time and Margaret Thatcher at the time saying that a BDS campaign cannot be launched. It is not feasible. It does not even assist the black people that are in South Africa at the time. And those are some of the same sentiments that we get, where the BDS campaign is concerned. But we're saying, look, that is not the reality. Like Mohammed is saying, that the idea is to get ordinary citizens on the ground to speak out. Ordinary citizens can influence foreign policies of their countries to say the situation in Palestine is not just, and it's there's discrimination against the indigenous people that are there, and ordinary people on the ground can take a stance against that, just as in Apartheid South Africa that happened.
Well, regarding the Jewish community, we are very excited that this year, during the Israeli Apartheid Week, there will be events being hosted by members of the Jewish community. And we're very proud that we do have progressive Jews within our movement that are beginning to speak out. Their voices are very important, and their voices should be lauded, just as how white South Africans during the apartheid regime, those that stood out from their community, those such as Ronnie Castrels or Joe Slovo, those that chose to or or Beis Nodi, who chose to come out and condemn apartheid and say, not in my name.
Yeah.
Likewise, we celebrate the Jewish comrades within our movement that are participating in the Palestinian solidarity movement and are making it very clear that Israel does not speak in the name of all Jews, and that it's only a group of Jewish people that recognize Israel as a state for them and for them only.
And what is the solution that you guys would be pushing for Palestine and Israel during this week?
Well, we really take inspiration from the South African struggle and from the South African solution. We really think that a country for all people, whether you are Jewish, Muslim, Palestinian, or any other, can be created in the Middle East for all that reside in that area. But ultimately, the solution will lie with the indigenous Palestinians and the Israelis that currently live there. We do hope that a negotiated settlement similar to the South African settlement can be reached.
What about thorny issues like Jerusalem and the rebuilding of temples there and those sorts of scenarios? What about those?
I mean, look, like what Mohammed is saying, some of this, we cannot impose what must happen in that area. In the same breath that, the international community said, look, we just want to create conditions that we can bring the two to a table and have a negotiated settlement. It's not our place to discuss and resolve on the issues in Palestine thereof.
Well, guys, we've just run out of time. I think we're getting about ready to go into the court with the Oscar Pistorius trial. I'm sure you're following it, as is everyone else following it around the world. But thank you for joining us, and all the best with Apartheid Week, the campaign that you guys are busy with next week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's just take another look at what you're thinking about on social media at the moment. It's been Oscar all the way thus far. But what else are you talking about? Oh, well, Justice Malala. Who put Justice Malala up here? Who put Justice Malala up? Thank you. Mpumelelo Mhlabane. Has Jeff Radebe started processes of extraditing that Shrindavani yet? We want this televised too. Well, Mr. Radebe has already sent his good wishes to the prosecution team. Rector Bukea says, why would a person who claims to be innocent be appealing every court judgment to avoid extradition? Why? Hashtag Devani, says the rector. And Lithium, if I'm right, or Letitia M. Getting it. Letitia M. I think that's the one. Devani is still not back in South Africa, but I think his time is up. Another person who thinks South Africans are stupid. We will see. Yeah, I think a lot of people would like to see Shrindavani back in South Africa. Everyone is welcome, except Justice Malala. SABC.co.za/news. That's where you can get all the updates all of the time. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break. Hopefully when we come back, we're going to the courtroom for the start of day 2 of the Oscar Pistorius trial of the century.
Get your business online with a T-Biz starter package from Telkom Business. Get up to 2 megabits per second ADSL with 5 gigs soft cap internet data and 5 gigs promo data. Free domain registration, free 1 gig storage with email accounts, and free night surfer data and social media data. All for just 249 Rand per month. Call, click, go to a Telkom store.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. We're still waiting for the court to get underway. Of course, these matters always suffer many delays. So we'll continue with our broadcast until we go live into the court. But let's first take a look at the top stories on SABC News right now. The state's first witness in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial is expected to return to the stand in the next few minutes to complete her testimony of the events during the night of Valentine's Day last year, when Pistorius allegedly killed his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp. Pistorius advocate Barry Roo will continue with his cross-examination of Michelle Burger in the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Burger's house is less than 200 meters from the house of Pistorius. She testified that she heard a woman scream for help before she heard gunshots. The National Prosecuting Authorities say their next witness will be Burger's husband. Justice Minister Jeff Radebe has praised the South African prosecution team for its efforts towards having honeymoon murder suspect Shirin Devani extradited to South Africa. This after the High Court in Britain dismissed Devani's appeal against extradition. Devani, who is from Bristol in Western England, will face charges related to the murder of his wife Annie in Cape Town in November 2010. This while they were on honeymoon. Well, we've just heard that the court is about to get underway. Michelle Burger, the first witness, is still on the stand. Let's go to the North Gauteng High Court for today's proceedings.
You're still under oath, ma'am? You may be seated. Yes, Mr. Roo.
Thank you, madam. Good morning. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
I'm going to deal with two aspects today only, so that you know where I'm going. The first one would be credibility, and the second one will be reliability. Now, I asked you yesterday a couple of times and still do not have your answer. But we have a copy of the record, and if necessary, I'll make it available, and of course to the court. And that is that before you made your statement, you did not believe Oscar Pistorius' version that that he thought that Reeva was an intruder. When he shot Reeva, that he thought it was an intruder. What do you say about that?
Milady, as I said yesterday, I cannot understand when I heard the version how there wasn't mention made of a female that shouted. I clearly heard a female shout. So, as I stated yesterday, the person that can answer that will be Mr. Pistorius.
So what you say is that when you heard at the bail application that it was put there that Reeva did not shout, you immediately realized, but this cannot be because I distinctly heard a woman shouting, and by inference it must have been Reeva. Is my understanding correct?
Milady, I wondered where is the lady that was shouting. I heard that and I felt I had to say what I heard. Also, my colleague said to me I need to state what I heard.
Is my summary correct that I put to you?
Please, can you repeat your summary, sir?
Please, if you don't mind, madam, just listen carefully to the question. The question was not that difficult, and it follows from your first answer. And that is, because you heard at the bail application that it was put on behalf of Mr. Pistorius, that the woman was not screaming, which we know could only have been Reeva, this woman. you realize this could not be, because you distinctly heard the woman screaming, which could only have been Reeva.